I heard crying coming from somewhere between the collapsed fridge and the rusty shopping carts. At first, I thought it was a cat, or maybe a baby someone had left in the trash. You wouldn't believe what people throw away out here. But when I got closer, picked my way through broken glass and moldy bags, I stopped dead. It wasn't a person, and it wasn't a cat. It was a bear cub. He was small, way too small. Dirty, matted fur, one eye nearly swollen shut, and a deep cut along his side that had dried into a crusted mess. He was trembling, letting out these horrible, choked sobs that sounded almost human. That sound has stayed with me longer than I'd like to admit. I stood there, blinking. I hadn't seen anything this alive in weeks. I mean, really alive. Not like the rats that ran over your legs while you slept. Not like the buzzards watching from the trees. I looked around. No mother. No prince. Just this one poor soul tucked between a stained mattress and a cracked toilet bowl. I took a step forward. The cub flinched so hard he banged his head against the shopping cart behind him. I froze, held up both hands like I was surrendering to a cop. Hey, easy, buddy," I whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you." He didn't believe me. And why would he? What's a guy who smells like mildew and old cigarettes doing in the middle of a dump trying to talk to a bear cub? I crouched slowly, letting my knees crack. My backpack made a quiet plasticky creak. I remembered I had half a protein bar stashed somewhere in there. Took me a second to find it, but when I did, I unwrapped it and held it out like an offering. He stared at it, sniffed, then looked at me, then back at the bar. I laid it on the ground and backed away 2 steps. He waited, sniffed again, then dragged himself forward. His back leg wasn't working right. That's when I realized how bad off he was. Every movement was shaky, like he didn't know what would hurt and what wouldn't. When he got to the bar, he licked it first. Then he chewed the edge. And then it was gone. He looked up at me again, quieter now. Still scared, but not as sharp. More tired than anything. "Yeah," I muttered. "Me too. I should have left him there. I know that. I don't have a roof over my own head, let alone the means to help a wild animal. But I couldn't just walk away. You'd have to be made of stone to look at that thing and do nothing." I went back to my corner of the warehouse. It's about 2 miles from the dump, half flooded, mold climbing up the walls. I found an old army blanket someone tossed last winter. I wrapped the cub in it like a baby, ignoring the smell. He didn't fight me, too weak. The walk back took forever. I had to stop every few minutes to check if he was still breathing. I don't know what I expected when we got back. Maybe that he'd die quietly and I'd bury him out back, like the dog I once had. Or maybe that he'd run off once he got warm. But that night, for the first time in years, I didn't feel completely alone. I laid him on a foam pad I'd salvaged from a burned-out RV. The blanket was soggy and smelled like mildew and wet fur. I made a little nest with some clothes I hadn't worn in a while. He watched me the whole time. Didn't growl, didn't cry, just watched. When I woke up the next morning, he was still breathing. I could see his chest rise and fall in tiny little jerks. His cut looked worse in daylight. I cleaned it the best I could with a bottle of water and some bandages I found in a first aid kit behind the old vending machine. He whimpered, but didn't fight me. I named him Patch. Seemed fitting. I spent the day scrounging. Dumpster behind the gas station gave me a couple of hot dogs. I mashed one up and mixed it with some old crackers. He ate a bit, then passed out again. I stayed awake all night just watching him. That was the first time in years I prayed. Not to get out of this life. Not for a second chance. Just for him to live another day. Patch wasn't supposed to live more than a day. I told myself that. Maybe it was easier to brace for the worst. But each morning, I woke up and there he was. Alive, breathing, eyes a little clearer. And that meant I had to figure out what came next. The first week was all trial and error. He wouldn't touch anything cold. He didn't like crackers unless they were soggy. And for some reason, he absolutely hated canned tuna, which I thought was a luxury. He'd snort at it like I'd insulted his whole family. I laughed the first time he did that. First time I'd laughed in a long while. But he loved soft bread. And boiled eggs. I stole a dozen once, swapping out the empty carton from the back of the gas station fridge. I don't feel proud of it, but I'd do it again. There was this one time I came back with a half bag of mini marshmallows. He dragged them off my coat like it was a treasure chest. The next morning I woke up to find the floor sticky, his fur covered in goo, and the entire bag empty. He looked miserable, but when I scolded him, he rolled on his back like a puppy. His belly was round as a ball, and he kept hiccuping. That's when it hit me he wasn't just surviving. He was starting to trust me. I wasn't just background noise anymore. I was something in his world he could rely on. The warehouse wasn't much. A collapsed roof on the far side. Broken windows I'd covered with plastic. But it was dry. I'd made a little corner for him with blankets and scraps of carpet. Every night he curled into a tight ball and breathed heavy like a tired old man. Sometimes he whimpered in his sleep. I never asked what he was dreaming about. I didn't need to. I talked to him more than I talked to people. Told him about my sister, about how I used to do maintenance work for a ski lodge until I got laid off. How I tried to make it in town but ended up here one bad choice at a time. He never answered, obviously, but he listened. You could see it in his eyes. There were nights we sat in silence, just listening to the wind pushing through the cracks in the metal walls. Sometimes I'd hum songs I barely remembered. He seemed to like those nights the most. Calm. Predictable. One afternoon, he started nudging my boot with his nose. I thought he wanted food, but when I got up, he just followed me around like a shadow. I grabbed a broken broomstick, waved it in front of him. He pawed at it once, then again. That was our first game. The way he chased it, stumbling and falling, then getting up again, it reminded me of kids in a playground. He liked to chew on things too. Old shoes, plastic containers, a glove I lost years ago. One time he got hold of a rag soaked in oil. I had to chase him in circles to get it back. He made this tiny grunting sound when he was annoyed, like an old man yelling at the TV. By the second week, he was walking better. Still limped a little, but he wasn't dragging his leg anymore. His eyes were brighter, fur less matted. He'd started grooming himself, licking his paw and swiping at his face like a kitten. Every now and then he'd try to climb into my sleeping bag, like he couldn't stand the idea of not touching someone. I was sitting outside one morning, drinking the last of some instant coffee I'd bartered for. The warehouse sat near an old access road, barely used, mostly overgrown. Pickup truck rolled by slow. Didn't think much of it until it stopped. It was an old Chevy, mud-caked, one headlight busted. The window rolled down and a man leaned out. He had one of those faces that never smiles. Just blank. "You live here?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. He looked like the kind of guy who'd shoot first if he got nervous. "Just keeping warm," I said. He didn't say anything for a long time, just stared past me. I realized he could see Patch through the broken plastic. "That a dog?" I nodded. "Sorta." He rolled the window back up and drove off. Slow. Watching. I didn't like it. My skin itched after he left. There's a difference between someone curious and someone measuring you. That guy was doing math. The kind of math that ends with a net or a cage. I started keeping Patch inside more. At night, I blocked off the holes in the plastic. He didn't like it. He'd grunt and paw at the wall. But I needed him safe. I even made a crude latch for the door with a bent spoon and some wire. A few days later, same truck passed again. Didn't stop. Just cruised by slow, tires crackling on the gravel. The way his eyes flicked toward the building as he passed. It chilled me. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside felt louder. Every gust of wind made my jaw clench. I held a piece of pipe under my blanket, just in case. I kept one boot on. Slept in shifts, 30 minutes here, 20 there. Eyes open more than closed. And then, one morning, I woke up to him not in his nest. Heart stopped. I looked around, behind the shelf, under the table. Panic rising. Then I saw him, standing on all fours, wobbling but upright, walking toward me, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Patch. On his feet. Eyes locked on mine. I didn't cry, but I came close. He made it. He was still small, still healing. But he made it. He reached me, bumped his head into my leg, then collapsed beside me with a long groan, like he'd just climbed a mountain. Maybe, for him, he had. And in that moment, I knew. I'd fight tooth and nail to protect this little thing. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. A few days after Patch stood on his own, the truck came back. This time, it didn't just roll by slow. It stopped. Right outside the warehouse. I was sitting on the floor, trying to fix a broken zipper on my backpack, when I heard tires crunching gravel. Patch lifted his head, ears twitching. I stood up slowly and looked through a crack in the plastic. Two men. Not the guy from before. These two wore green jackets with patches on the sleeves. Forest Service. One of them was younger, mid-30s maybe, with a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses. The other looked older, paunchy, with a clipboard under his arm. I stepped outside before they could come in. No point in hiding. "Morning," the older one said. He didn't smile. "Morning," I replied, tried to keep my voice even. We've gotten some calls. Couple locals say there's a bear cub living around here. I said nothing. You seen anything like that? The younger one added, adjusting his sunglasses. I shrugged. Lots of raccoons. Some possums. Not what we're talking about. They looked past me. I could feel their eyes scanning the plastic-covered windows. We'll need to take a look around, the older one said. This isn't private property, I said. But it's not yours either. We're authorized to intervene in matters of wildlife endangerment. That cub, if there is one, should be in a licensed rehabilitation center. And if there isn't one? They didn't answer. I stood still, arms crossed. My hands were sweating. You've got until tomorrow, the older one finally said. If there's anything here that shouldn't be, get rid of it. Because next time we come back, we won't be asking. They left without another word. Dust from their tires coated the air. I stood there until it settled, then went inside. Patch was hiding behind the metal shelves, eyes wide, body low to the ground. It's okay, I said softly. Not yet, not yet. But I knew it was time. I packed that night. Just essentials. A flashlight, my knife, some canned food, the first aid kit, 2 water bottles, and the last clean blanket. I made a sling out of a canvas bag to carry Patch when he got tired. He still couldn't go far on his own. By sunrise, we were on the move. The plan, if you could call it that, was to follow an old logging trail up into the mountains. It hadn't been used in years. I knew it would eventually lead to a ranger's cabin that might still have supplies. It was risky, but staying was worse. The first few hours weren't bad. The morning was cool, air full of pine and wet soil. Patch walked beside me, stopping every now and then to sniff at moss or fallen branches. I tried not to think about what we'd do if we got caught, or if he collapsed. Around midday, clouds rolled in. The trail got steeper, winding between cliffs and old tree stumps. My legs burned, back aching from the pack and Patch's weight when I had to carry him. By afternoon, I heard something behind us, cracking twigs, then silence, then again. I froze. Patch looked up at me. I whispered, "Don't move." I held my breath, heart pounding. Nothing. Then a squirrel darted across the trail. False alarm. But I didn't relax. We kept moving. By evening, we were near the river. I could hear it before I saw it. A low roar, fast and angry from the spring melt. The old wooden footbridge I remembered was still there. Barely. Planks missing. Rails gone. The water churned below. Patch hesitated. I could tell he didn't like it. Me neither, I muttered. I went first, testing each step. Wood groaned but held. Halfway across, I turned to coax him forward. He took a step, then another. Halfway there, the board under him snapped. I lunged, arms outstretched. Too late. He fell. The splash was violent. The river grabbed him instantly. I didn't think. Just jumped. Cold like knives. My body went stiff, lungs seized. I fought to stay above water, eyes scanning. I saw him 10 feet downstream, head bobbing, paws flailing. I swam hard. Branches scraped my arms. Rocks bruised my legs. I caught up to him just as he was going under again. Grabbed a paw. Missed. Grabbed again. Got him. I kicked toward the shore. Every stroke a battle. My arms were jelly, but the mud was close. I pushed once more and we slammed into the bank. I pulled him out, collapsed beside him. He was coughing, sputtering, shaking, but alive. So was I. I don't remember how long we lay there. Long enough for the cold to settle in my bones. Long enough for the sun to vanish. I looked at him. He looked at me. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The next morning, we followed the river upstream. Both of us limping, soaked to the bone, muscles stiff like rusted gears. The storm had passed, but the chill stuck around. I kept glancing at Patch. He walked close, fur still matted and damp, eyes dull. The river hadn't broken him, but it had drained something out of both of us. Every step he took looked heavier than the last, like his little body was running on memory alone. A few miles in, we spotted it. A cabin, tucked behind a wall of pines, like it didn't want to be found. The door was half off the hinges, windows dusted with spiderwebs. I pushed it open and stepped inside, ready for the worst. For a second, I thought it might collapse under our breath. The place smelled like mildew, wood rot, and mouse droppings, but to us, it was a palace. Instead, I found dust, mold, and silence. But it was shelter. A broken cot leaned in the corner. Rusted pots hung from hooks near a brick fireplace. A small pantry sat open, its contents mostly useless, except for a few cans of beans and a jar of peanut butter. Jackpot. There were even a couple of half-melted candles, bent and dusty, but usable. I lit one and placed it on a cracked windowsill. Patch curled up by the hearth as I gathered dry wood and tried to spark a flame with my lighter. Took 10 minutes and half the fuel, but eventually, a tiny fire cracked to life. I added a few twigs at a time, coaxing it like it was a newborn. The warmth felt foreign, like something we no longer deserved. But we took it anyway. I stripped out of my wet shirt, wrapped myself in a musty curtain, and sat beside him. For the first time in days, we were warm. Not safe, but warm. I could feel the tension in my shoulders loosen, just slightly, like my body finally believed we might get through the night. That night, I lay on the floor, my back against the wall, watching the fire die slow. Patch slept beside me, curled so tight he looked like a pillow. My hand rested on his side, rising and falling with each breath. It was the closest I'd felt to peace in years. Even the wind outside seemed to quiet, as if the forest itself was giving us a moment. I thought about my brother. He died in a car wreck. Up here, actually. Took a curve too fast in the rain. I remembered the call, the drive, the silence at his funeral. I remembered standing beside that closed casket, fists in my pockets, wondering if he was cold in there. We used to come to cabins like this in the summers. He'd bring fireworks. I'd bring a fishing rod. Mom always stayed home. I used to wish she'd come with us. Now I couldn't remember her voice. I couldn't remember the last time someone said my name. Funny what you remember when everything's gone. Grief doesn't leave. It settles in like an old tenant. You stop noticing it, but it never stops noticing you. The next day, I fortified the place. Dragged a shelf in front of the door. Covered the windows with cardboard. Rigged a noise trap with tin cans and fishing line from the shed. I found an old hatchet under the floorboards. Dull but better than nothing. I sharpened it slowly, one stroke at a time, while Patch watched from the corner. Patch got restless. He started pacing the room, pawing at the corners. I took him outside for short walks behind the cabin, always listening, always watching. Birds mostly, the occasional crack of branches. Nothing unusual. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling we weren't alone. Until that night. It was late. I was dozing, Patch snoring at my feet, when I heard it. Pop. Not a branch. Not an animal. A gunshot. I rolled over, heart hammering. Listened. Silence. Then a second shot. Closer. I grabbed my bag, shoved in the food, flashlight, knife. Patch stood up, alert. His body low, ears back. The fire had died, and the darkness inside felt like a second skin. We're leaving, I whispered. I slung the bag, scooped him up. He was bigger now, harder to carry, and pushed through the back door into the woods. The latch snapped off in my hand. I didn't bother fixing it. The air was sharp, ground soft with pine needles. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. Something inside me knew whoever fired those shots, they weren't shooting at deer. We ran. Through thickets, over logs, slipping, gasping. I could hear something, or someone, moving behind us. The forest played tricks on your ears. One step could echo like 10. Still, I didn't stop. I kept my eyes ahead, heart in my throat, lungs on fire, until I fell. My foot caught a root. I hit the ground hard. My ankle screamed. Pain bloomed up my leg like fire under skin. Patch ran ahead, stopped, turned back. Go, I croaked. Keep going. But he didn't. He circled me, whining. I tried to stand, fell again. The pain was blinding. I could hear voices now, distant but real. They were calling out. Not my name, but something sharp, angry. Orders. I pushed him. Run. Now. He didn't move, so I threw a stick. Not at him, just past him. He flinched, startled. Looked at me one last time, and then he ran. Into the dark. I stayed there, half sitting, half sprawled, breath ragged, ankle throbbing. My hands were scraped, palms bleeding from the fall. Every part of me wanted to scream, but I stayed quiet. I had to. The voices got closer, but all I could think about was the sound of him disappearing through the trees, and how empty the forest felt without that little heartbeat beside mine. I don't remember falling asleep that night. The pain in my ankle was like a drumbeat in my skull. Cold crept into my bones, and the stars blinked above like they were watching me drown in dirt. I must have blacked out. When I came to, it was morning. Pale, cold light spilled through the branches above. I was lying on my side, barely able to move. The forest around me was still. No voices, no shots, just birdsong and wind. I tried sitting up. My ankle screamed again, swollen now, purple and stiff. Every inch of me ached. My throat was dry, lips cracked. The food in my bag was gone, either lost in the scramble or left behind. I was alone. No sign of Patch. No paw prints. Just me, a broken man in the middle of nowhere. I thought I might die there. Maybe I deserved to, but I didn't want it to end like that. Not after everything. Not after him. I crawled, dragged myself with my arms, inch by inch, toward nothing. Toward somewhere. I don't even know how far I got. Maybe 50 feet, maybe 500. I stopped under a bent pine and passed out again. When I woke up, the world was darker. My mouth tasted like copper. And then I heard it. A low, grumbling sound. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating. Then it came again, closer. A grunt. A shuffle. I rolled painfully onto my side. And there he was, Patch, standing 10 feet away. Taller, stronger, face streaked with mud. But it was him. I knew it. He looked at me, tilted his head like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then he grunted again. I blinked tears away. You came back. He stepped forward, then stopped, turned, looked over his shoulder, and grunted again, like he was telling me to follow. Buddy, I croaked. I can't walk. He took a few more steps, looked back, waited. I didn't know what else to do. I started crawling again, hands raw, knees bruised. He stayed just ahead, checking over his shoulder every few feet, guiding me. After what felt like hours, I saw it. A trail, an actual dirt path, and then a figure, a man, tall, gray beard, dark green coat, holding a rifle but not aiming it. He saw me, eyes narrowed. Then he jogged forward. Jesus, he muttered. You're the one they've been chasing. I didn't have the strength to answer. He crouched beside me, looked at Patch, who stood nearby, tense but unafraid. I saw him the other night, the man said. The cub. Followed him here. Figured he was wild, till I saw him backtrack. Thought he was leading me to something. Turns out he was. He hoisted me up with surprising strength. Patch walked ahead as we moved slowly down the trail. The man introduced himself as Bill, retired ranger, lived part-time up here off the grid. Said he'd been keeping an eye on things since the first shot rang out. Didn't like how those guys were handling it, he muttered. Didn't feel right, so I stayed close, just in case. He brought me to a small cabin, nicer than the last. Real windows, a working stove. He set me down on a cot, wrapped my ankle, gave me water. Patch didn't leave my side. The next week was a blur. Bill helped me heal, fed me, asked few questions. I told him what I could between doses of painkillers and sleep. He never judged, just listened. You got guts, he said once. Not a lot of folks would have done what you did. He made a call to an old friend who worked at a wildlife rehab center downstate. Arranged for Patch to be checked out by professionals. But here's the thing, they didn't take him away. After everything, they let him stay. Said he'd bonded too deep. Said he was safer here, where he could be monitored and still be close to what he knew. And me? I stayed too. Bill got me a job. Helping out at the ranger station, clearing trails, checking cameras, feeding the animals that came in hurt or lost. I got a roof again, a bed, warm meals. But more than that, I got a reason. Patch grew fast, healthy, curious, strong. He'd follow me down the trails, nap under the porch, splash in the creek like he owned it. He wasn't a pet. He was a partner. People started calling him the Ridge Cub. Locals left out scraps. School kids drew pictures of him. Folks said he had a soul. I didn't disagree. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, sure it had all been a dream. But then I'd hear him snoring under the window, still here, still watching me like he knew. Spring turned to summer, then fall. We settled into the rhythm of the mountains. One morning, I stood outside the station, coffee in hand, Patch at my side. Mist rolled through the pines. Birds called. I looked at him, then at the forest. And I whispered, I didn't save you. He turned his head. You saved me. And I meant it.